I'm Michael, and welcome to Beyond the Screenplay's What We're Watching, our podcast where we watch a limited television series week by week. Today we are talking about White Lotus Season 3, Episode 4, titled Hide or Seek, available on HBO Max. I'm joined by the Beyond the Screenplay team, Trisha Rand.
Hello, everyone.
Brian Bittner.
Hello, hello.
And Alex Calleros.
Hi.
So first things first, if you are listening, and definitely if you're watching, you might have noticed things are different. Alex and I are in a hotel room. We are in sunny, warm Canada. Anyway, so things are slightly different setup here. So apologies if it sounds a little bit worse. But we've watched White Lotus Season 4, and we're here to talk about it.
Season 3, Episode 4.
Episode 4, and we're here to talk about it.
Alex, punch him when he makes a mistake. You can do that now.
Got it.
Okay, so this episode, some things happened. We got some answers. Movement occurred. There's still a lot more movement that needs to happen, but we got some interesting insight to the Michelle Monaghan character, where she apparently has issues with old people, or being perceived as old people, or
right.
old people swimming, one of those. And so that launched them onto this little tangent narrative where they ended up getting attacked by super soakers, which was hilarious, and I enjoyed that sequence a lot. And then we have all the stuff happening on the yacht where the family is starting to collide with Gary, Greg, and all the different people. And what's his name? Walter Goggins reveals his backstory a little bit. We understand now why he's here. The person who allegedly killed his father owns the White Lotus. So some things started happening, answers starting occurring. And yeah, I want to hear everybody's thoughts. Alex, what are your thoughts?
Also, it's Walton Goggins. Punch him again.
What did I say? God damn it.
It was a fun episode because we talked last week about, when are we going to start combining these characters and having worlds collide? And I think especially with the yacht, and the yacht is sailing off to the next episode at the end of this one, with the two boys on board from the Ratliff family. And I think that this is what we've been waiting for, is like what kind of antics, what kind of character dramas are going to emerge when they're paired with Chelsea and what's the French woman's name?
Charlotte?
Chloe.
I think the actress is Charlotte.
Okay. Yeah, that's exciting to me. I'm excited that, we finally are moving forward with, like, we have the Chekhov's gun has been introduced. Yes, that's there now. Jason Isaac has that. And then, I thought it was interesting that we began the episode on the Michelle Monaghan character trying to reach her, I guess, actor boyfriend, who is not responding anymore. And so there's something, with her, she is like, she presents this image of, I've got this amazing life, this amazing partner, we just can't keep our hands off each other. That's obviously not the reality. And so, she seems to be kind of flailing in this episode to, I don't know, have fun, have kind of pleasure, distraction to get away from whatever that reality is. So this episode felt like we both finally had things start to happen. And it was almost like one last bit of setup before I think maybe finally next episode, some dynamite might explode. So it was both movement and yet a feeling of setup, and wait till next week. The party boat is like on its way to the party, not to the party yet.
Right. Yeah. Would have been nice to feel this way a couple episodes ago, but at least we're on our way.
And the ending where we do both Belinda and Greg now like kind of know about each other, and we end with those shots of them both like looking at the computers. Mm-hmm. So that is exciting too. I'm excited to see where that story goes.
Yeah. Brian, what about you?
I thought it was the funnest and funniest episode of the season so far. We got to see Lucius Malfoy brandish his wand. And I feel like, kind of like you guys are saying, it's the first episode so far this season where I'm like, I can't wait for I really want to be able to watch the next episode right away. And that's what I was missing from the first few episodes. And it's like, yes, it's still a lot of setup, but it's set up in the way where I'm just like, ooh, we're there. Like everything is kind of happening. And I think Yeah, something, an observation that I made this episode was like, it's not fun to watch people be in their own world and not interact with anybody, right? Which we have from Rick and Timothy, Jason Isaacs' character, and Gary Gregg. We have three main characters who are just like middle-aged white guys who are like, I don't want to talk to anybody. I'm going to be over here doing my own thing, right? And what's starting to happen finally is, Chelsea confronted Rick and said, like, what's going on? Talk to me. He opened up. They had what seemed like a genuine moment for Rick, of like emotion. And obviously, as you just said, like Belinda finding out about Gary Gregg. So it's like that is very clearly like coming to a head. And then Timothy's situation has been awful since almost the beginning of the season, but it's getting worse and worse and worse. And he's just going down this downward spiral. So it's really nice to see these characters who are like trying to live in their own little bubble, just not being able to anymore. And I think that's the thing that's like making them all finally start to pay off for me. And I also like this as like kind of a 2-part episode where, like I said, I feel like this show is usually so good about making me just like desperately want to be able to watch the next episode. And this is the first time this season that I've actually felt that.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. And it still remains to be seen how the Michelle Monaghan trio is going to fit in with everybody else.
Yeah.
Right, they're still being kept separate.
Yeah.
And now they have the Russians, so that's interesting. Yeah,
Right.
What are they going to do?
Right. But I feel like at some point it's going to collide and it's going to be interesting. But yeah. Trisha, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I remain dissatisfied with the number of things that have happened. And by that, I mean the number of things that have not happened in this series. Over our last season of podcasting, when we were talking about features, which is what we normally do, we identified this due per minute metric of how much stuff is actually happening per minute, what are characters actually doing. And it actually isn't that many things this episode. In terms of reversals is mainly what I mean, or dramatic changes in direction. Now, the tension is being ratcheted up slightly on virtually every storyline. But the actual direction where the storylines are headed has not really materially changed for virtually everybody in this episode. We saw in the last episode that Timothy Jason Isaacs' character, who is the main character of this season, I guess, so much screen time on that guy just wandering around drunk on a boat. But he started using his wife's drugs in the last episode. And then this episode, and he was coming unhinged. He seemed, the minute that he gets that phone call in the first episode, I was like, oh, this guy's a family annihilator. Which, if you know what that is in true crime serial killer parlance, it's just usually a rich white guy who loses his financial status or his job, career standing, murders his entire family, and then, kind of goes on about his life. And walks away. Typically in the case of, I don't recommend looking any of this up, by the way, but
I thought you were going to say you don't recommend doing this.
This is not a recommended course of action. Yeah. No, he typically a family annihilator is somebody who's very rich. They lose their job. They continue to go to somewhere and pretend to have a job, usually for quite a while. And then one day they just snap, murder their entire family, and walk away, typically. And he is the most classic archetype of that. And so, but that's been his trajectory from day one. And so right. He's spiraling, but that's, none of it is changing. In a downfall arc, we identify the moment hinge pin of drama as being the chance where you start to think maybe he's going to get better. Maybe he's going to pull out of the nosedive. Maybe he has a chance. And maybe he still will. But so far, he's headed one direction the entire time I've seen him. And he's now got a gun. And I'm but he's been heading this direction the whole time. So none of it is a huge oh my God, what's happening with Timothy? There's no huge step back shock factor to it. And I feel the same way about all the other things. Piper's I'm going to quit school and live here for a year. I was A, I already knew that. B, she hasn't actually revealed it to her family yet. That was just teased in this episode. So it still hasn't materially impacted anything. The friend group hasn't blown up. It's deteriorating, I guess.
But
They
this episode, it was flat. Like there was not really any ratcheting up of tension with them.
I mean, yeah, it seems like Michelle Monaghan's character is unhappy in her marriage, and she's trying to like push them into a place where something might happen. But so far that hasn't happened yet. And they're still being separated off, partitioned off. And even with Rick and Chelsea, he hasn't told Chelsea anything that I didn't already sort of know or had guessed.
Sure.
Like I sort of knew or had guessed everything he revealed to Chelsea. And so again, and she was like, don't go to Bangkok, don't go. And he's like, well, I'm going to go anyway. So nothing was a reversal there either. The characters walked into the scene essentially the same way that they walked out of the scene, with maybe a slight tweak in their psychology or like decision-making process, but the decision isn't different. And that's just not scene writing, like in a way that feels like the due per minute is high, which is what I want from this. And like, I'm not angry at this show. We've covered way worse. Way worse. But I turned this episode off and I was like, oh my God, is it me? Am I the one ruining White Lotus season 3 by watching it? Because it seems like the other two were really good. And is this a me problem? But I don't know if that's the case.
I really like that you pointed out the reversal thing, because that is like in these shows, we're talking about this streaming era of shows and where things kind of just move an inch every episode. We kind of start to feel like, well, something moved at all. Wow, something happened.
Right.
But yeah, was that happening a reversal? That's a good question, because reversals are where we really feel like, okay, wow, like I'm getting my money's worth from this story, because this thing is changing in a way that is both expected yet surprising. And you're right that like, even though these characters are moving forward, their trajectories are not. It's this kind of slow burn on a path that has been there kind of from the start. So it's interesting. It's like, yeah, it's like this slow acceleration of the single path versus a change of path.
Yeah, and even the like mashing up of characters that I was promised in this episode. You guys spent the entire last episode
they
talking to me.
Technically were on the boat together.
Yeah, but they kind of talk to each other. Like, you know, Parker Posey's character, Victoria, just sat there and was like, I don't want to talk to this person or this person. She gets into these micro conversations that make her like disdainful of this type of person. And there's some irony to that, right? Because we know that Jason Isaacs is this type of person. But there's nothing changing there. She already was suspicious of those people and didn't like them. And then she gets off the boat and she still doesn't like them. And then the brothers are on their same trajectory. They were already sort of in the mix with Chloe and Chelsea. And now they still are, but nobody else was really mashed up. Like, the one interesting scene is the one where Timothy has to talk to Gary Gregg. And they got to some thematic, interesting, like, sort of places in that little conversation at the bar. But again, no one made a different decision coming out of that conversation than they had already planned to make, as far as I can tell.
And I think the exception to all that is with Lachlan. Who I just realized is Emily Mortimer's son.
Oh,
yeah,
so cute.
How cute.
And like, this episode was just like, he's like an undecided voter with his like dude bro brother and his Buddhist sister just being like playing tug of war with him, being like, you should probably believe in these things. You should probably believe in these things. You should probably live your life this way. You should probably live your life this way. And it is heartbreaking, you know, to have her really kind of admit this big decision that she has made and then have him be torn the other way, and then ultimately make the decision to stay on the boat and leave her to sort of fend for herself with talking to her parents. And I do feel like that was one of those things where, and again, it shouldn't be, hey, look, one thing happened, but I do feel like that was a thing that made me feel like, oh, that does feel like, I don't know if it's quite a reversal, because again, he was already being pulled between these two extremes, but it did feel like a real choice was made that will have some consequences.
I agree. That is a real choice.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. Like what you're identifying is exactly why this still feels like setup. It's because it still feels like groundwork is being laid in a feature. The first big reversal is the inciting incident that kicks off the story. We're still waiting for that big reversal in a lot of ways.
Halfway through the season.
Interesting, though, is like, right. That I think that there is, as you also said, there is like psychology that is being altered. And I feel like that was enough for me to like lean in and be like entertained and intrigued, and like a little bit of trajectory being established. And I think that's like really kind of speaks to how slow the show has been. It's like if the first 3 episodes we didn't quite even know like what's the trajectory, but like it's interesting that, you know, Piper is going to reveal that she wants to move to Thailand, while Tim is getting advice from Gary that's like, maybe you should live in Thailand because then you don't have to like go to jail. So like that is an interesting thing now that the Russians are involved with like the, you know, the friend group, and we see how kind of extreme this whatever need that the Michelle Monaghan character is having. Like there's starting to be like a shape of a thing that's pointing toward drama, and along the way, because things are getting revealed to other characters, and again, like you said, it's stuff we already knew, but because we know what the other characters know, there is a little bit of interesting, like how is Chelsea going to react to Rick sharing this thing, or and now that Tim is apparently like, we get his backstory, the stakes are higher for him. Maybe he's like suicidal, homicidal. What does he want with that gun? Whatever it is, it's extreme. Anyway, I feel like throughout, like with all the characters, we know enough now that the reveal of information, even though we already know it, is revealing in their reactions to that information. It's still not enough, but it was enough to keep me entertained and intrigued this episode anyway, which was nice.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I was clocking is how many setups we have now for a potential, well, not a potential, a definite murder, you know, that is going to happen, or series of murders. And it's like we've got guy talk, you know, a gun has been introduced, and not only has a gun been introduced, but Timothy has taken the gun, right? So now he has it. Rick, we know, is there to murder someone who's his dad, right? Like it's just his dad. Like she's like, oh, is this like Princess Bride? It's like, no,
quite
it's like
obviously.
Empire Strikes Back. Yeah. Obi-Wan told me you killed my father from a certain point of view. What's that?
Yeah, that was not obvious to me. Yeah.
Okay. It's like, I've never met my dad, and this random guy, like, you know, my dad showed up and disappeared. Now this guy owns everything. It's like, okay.
I assumed it's definitely not the guy who killed his father for sure.
Right.
But yeah, I hadn't thought that it is his father.
And then Gary Gregg certainly seems like he could do some stuff if he wanted to shut Belinda up for good, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like you have a lot of this setup, and I think that's I'm finding myself of two minds, which in one way that's cool because it's forcing us to kind of be like, okay, you showed us this dot and you showed us this dot, and now we're trying to connect them and kind of like, ooh, that's one way, that's one way, that's one way, and you know, maybe it's going to end up being Leslie Bibb, right? Like it could just be like a complete out of left field, like it's none of those things, right? It's like the gun, but the gun was in some totally different place. But at the same time, what I found fascinating about the first season, I mentioned when we did the first of these episodes, I felt the first season was cheating a little bit because it's just like, hey, someone's going to die. Anyway, here's just some people for like 6 hours. And then eventually like that leads to someone killing someone else. And it's like, okay. But at the same time, the difference between someone's going to die and like, here's just a bunch of like kind of jerks who might be angry or whatever, but they're not going to kill someone. Like, that feels like that's way farther than any of these characters would ever go. How are we ever going to get from here to there, right? But then the downside of this season is like, oh, you got a lot of people I buy would kill someone. So then the stakes of like, oh my gosh, can you believe someone's going to die? Isn't as like, it's not as far to go. Because I'm like, yeah, I absolutely believe someone's going to die. Someone could die next episode. Who knows, right? It's kind of lose-lose, because I feel like if you don't do enough of the sort of setup, then it feels like it's cheating. It feels like it just comes out of nowhere. And if you do too much of it, then I'm like, it's not as engaging or compelling to be like, I'm going to watch 8 episodes of a show just to see who dies.
I know what you mean, because like you're saying, watching season 1, you're like, how is somebody going to die in this show? And then season 2, you're sort of primed for that more, but you're still like, wait, but like, how is someone going to end up? And in this season, it's like, look at all the ways people could die in this show, which makes me wonder if they're going to play with the form a little bit, and if we're going to get to that shooting earlier than the finale, and then the second half is going to be...
That's what I'm kind of wondering, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm curious if that's... I think that'd be an interesting subversion of the form and evolution that I'm kind of hoping is going to happen.
Because actually, that is what I was going to say before you said that, was I wonder how much... Mike White is playing with the form this season, because it does feel like every season of the White Lotus, he's not trying to do the exact same thing. Like season 2 did feel very different than season 1 to me. Mm-hmm. And this season does feel darker. It feels less kind of fun. It feels more like there's this dark cloud over everything. And even the opening scene of the season with that shooting was much more horrifying. Like, it's kind of been like funny in other seasons. It's like, oh my God, there's like bodies on the beach. What's happening? But it's like, it's horrifying, but not like in that like mass shooting way. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's something different about this season, and I would love that. I would love it if he played with the form, and then kind of we now don't know what to expect, moving forward. Yeah. And I'll say one other thing too. Just speaking of form, like Trisha, your analysis is spot on. And then I wonder, what is this form? I think this has become like the meta question for me of this. What are we watching? Like, what is this streaming thing? And these shows that people are really responding to and love and talk about week by week. And yet, like, plot wise, like very little happens, And so it's almost this different form where we have these characters that we kind of simmer with week by week. And we have these kind of like psychological scenes that aren't really plot driven. And it's just interesting. It's almost like the expectations have evolved, and people aren't even expecting plot. It's like they're expecting something else, or like they're satisfied without plot. It's just very interesting.
Well, and as a huge Mad Men fan, I certainly don't need somebody to die or leave their spouse or suffer an injury or something, like every single episode of a long-running television show. What I think I'm missing here, though, is like more of a robust thematic underpinning to everything. Like, I wish I knew what everybody represented and thematically, and like what the debate is sort of at the heart. And that's, again, I have a feature like lens on everything, and I that's what I want from stuff. But like in a show like Mad Men, I understand what people represent. And so when there's conflict in a scene, I understand that it's not about this advertising campaign. I understand that it's about a clash of ideas. And I wish that this like had clearer sort of like angles on a much clearer thematic debate. And so like I understand that there's like wellness culture being satirized and sort of like American whiteness abroad more generally. But like I was reading, not on purpose, unavoidably, was reading a headline that was criticizing this season of the show for its lack of like meaningful angle on that. Like, I don't think that like Guy Talk and Lisa, what's the character's name?
Mook?
Lisa, the K-pop star, but like what's her character's name in this?
Mook.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. I don't see them like offering much by way of like drama or critique towards the like American like white characters here. And even like the hotel owner, I was curious to see what was going to happen with her. She's not in this episode. And you know, like there's Belinda's here. She's like kind of a member of the staff-ish, or she's there for like professional reasons. But again, because the characters are so partitioned off, I don't really know, like, when a scene is happening, I'm not really sure all the way, like, that the satire is as sharp as it could be, because I'm not sure that the thematic ideas are quite as sharp as they could be in the characterizations.
Yeah, and I'll say, thinking back to season 2, once again, I did feel like there was a much sharper debate happening through the characters about sex, about relationships. And I agree with you, Trisha. I'm missing that clear debate episode to episode.
And part of me does, again, wonder if it's playing with the form, and hopefully playing with the form doesn't just become the catch-all for we didn't do it as well as before.
Right.
But I think that the critique of the colonialism and, you know, all of that of like, you are someone that is, you know, going on vacation in somebody else's like home, that kind of thing was much sharper in previous seasons, to the point where it is almost like surprising how not in the forefront it is. And so enough to make me feel like it might be intentional, but I don't know what not making it in the forefront is doing yet.
Right.
So kind of like everything else with this season, it feels like intentional, but I'm not sure why just yet.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Mike White said that this season was, you know, where it was money and then sex. This was going to be like Eastern religion and spirituality, which is already just a more nebulous thing than like money or sex, you know, just to be like, this is a thing we can like show you and have like immediate conflict based around and immediate kind of exciting things happening for like a TV viewing week to week audience. And, you know, I think the thing we pointed out in the first episode is just like people trying to sort of find peace, right? Like people who are there to relax but can't let go of their home lives or can't let go of these other conflicts or whatever, or like Rick, who's trying to find peace through violence. And it's like that's like a whole almost reverse of the what we would think of, which is let go of all those things, right? You know, which maybe he will learn to do. And then we have like the sort of healers, you know, confronting the people who don't want to be healed in the episode. Like there's all this stuff here. And then of course, religion has been talked about a bit, where like that spirituality and religion can certainly, well, obviously do connect, but I'm saying the sort of what we think of as like inner peace, mental peace on one end, and what we think of as just like organized religion on the other end. There's a lot of crossover in that Venn diagram, a lot of ways those things can overlap. So there's a lot of ideas. We're just not seeing how those ideas are actually being used in the way that you guys are talking about to really like make points and make statements about these things.
Well, one thing that I thought was really interesting in this episode was the like horror sequence of the super soakers in the street and like the water fight. Because it felt really thematic, right? Like, because it could only be thematic, it doesn't do anything in terms of plot. So it must be thematic. And it did kind of remind me of Mad Men, of like something that would happen in a Mad Men episode where it's just like some shenanigans that end up being like deeply thematically resonant. But I kind of wish that what's his face there, masseuse Reiki healer guy, Valentin, thank you. I wish that he had explained a little more about what it is and what it means. And so their reaction would have more meaning to me, right? So it's like, if they're feeling literally attacked by other people just practicing their religion in their own city, then that's a really sharp social critique of this. But like, what does the water mean? What does it mean to get like soaked in the street in this city in this time during this festival? And of course, their reaction then is a thematic statement. But he's just kind of like, oh yeah, they have fights in the street on this particular holiday. I'm not going to tell you anything about. Don't worry about it. And I was like, I wish there was more.
Yeah, I mean, there's a thematic thing you can work with there, which is like, you know, they're leaving they are, when they're confronted with like older people, they're like, no, that's not us. That's scary and wrong. We have to leave. And then they're confronted by younger people who are with like literally kids playing with toys, and they're like, no, this is awful. This is not us either, right? So it's kind of like they are sort of like trapped between you know, in this certain stage of life. It's not doing a whole lot of that thematically, but it feels like there's a reason why those two sequences were like right next to each other.
I clocked that too. Again, I think. Yeah, they've talked about like getting work done and doing yoga and getting their energy healed and stuff like that. I do think it's in there. I just wish it was a little bit, again, a little meatier.
Right.
Yeah.
And also both those generations are like just having like the time of their lives. Like they're enjoying themselves, right?
Sure.
But then it's like that's not okay for specifically the Michelle Monaghan character.
Yeah, it's interesting you said, Brian, that Mike White said it's about like Eastern spirituality and religion, but there hasn't been a whole lot of really talking about it. Like for as much as Piper is expressing interest in Eastern spirituality, I don't hear her expressing the values or the ideas that she's really drawn to, or kind of like really trying to practice it. I mean, she kind of has these more surface level things like, Dad, put away your phone, or we should do this stuff. But there's a lot of really interesting philosophical ideas from Eastern religions, and that are really applicable and I think maybe they're going to be spoken out loud later, because I think I've heard them in some of the trailers. But I think just the idea of all of these people are trying to find peace, as we said, through the wrong means. Through Michelle Monaghan right now is kind of trying to like party her way out of her distress. Jason Isaac's probably gonna take his own life. We've got Rick trying to kill somebody to end his pain. And I feel like there's a lot to explore there with all this suffering, and Eastern religions are all about how like life is suffering, but there's an escape, which is kind of like just being in the present moment. Anyway, there's a lot there that I would love for the show to more explicitly explore, and it seems like it's just kind of relying on the backdrop of the place, as opposed to like those ideas being spoken or practiced. Yeah.
Really quickly, what do we think is in Belinda's closet?
Yeah, what's going on with that?
She keeps looking over.
There's like little sounds.
She heard something?
It's her monkey.
I don't know.
Yeah, monkey.
And there's like a coat hanging there that like if it was a horror movie would like, then the next time it would be a person, or she turns out the lights and it takes shape or whatever. Like,
I don't know. Every time she looks in that closet, I've got
Yeah. Well, and in the first episode, she hears a thing, but it's before she's in the house. So like, is it following her? I don't know. This like once was interesting. Twice was like, oh, something's happening. Third is like, okay, something's happening again today in this episode. It's like, this is just stop. Like, tell me what it is, or stop playing this scene from the previous two scenes.
We got to wait another week to see if we find out anything.
It's Jennifer Coolidge.
Yes. She didn't die.
Yep.
it's okay. I got it.
Yeah.
I got it figured out.
This episode was pretty clear.
Very clear.
I didn't know if they
clear.
show like Jennifer Coolidge's face, or
They
like
did, but
They don't.
No, but I know she was in the first two seasons, and she's not around anymore. So.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and we'll see, next episode is called Full Moon Party. So there's obviously going to be some partying, but hopefully we understand more what this full moon celebration is all about.
Oh, that'd be nice to know,
Because that meaning really is absent, but as we're pointing out, is necessary, I think, to derive meaning from the going.
I definitely think something's got to go down with Lachlan in the next episode, because he's going to be pressured by his brother into things he probably doesn't want to do. Yeah. So that'll be fun, at least. Parties will happen. Yeah. Multiple parties will be occurring.
Yeah. Cool. Well, yeah. So if you want to get these episodes as soon as they're ready, as soon as they drop, usually on Tuesday, because we record on Monday, head over to the Beyond the Screenplay Patreon, where we release them as soon as they're done being edited. If not, they're released Saturday mornings. I want to say a big thank you to the patrons for supporting this show. Thank you to our producer, Vince Major, our editor, Mike Worth, and the whole Nebula Studios team. I'm Michael Tucker. I've been joined today by Trisha Rand, Brian Bittner, and Alex Calleros. And we will see you in the next episode for discussion of episode 5, Full Moon Party.
Bye, everybody.
bye-bye.
Bye.